We'll go ahead and kick things off. Hi, everybody. Happy Monday, and welcome to the September edition of the Meeting the Moment webinar from the Saul Zaentz Charitable Foundation. It is so great to have you with us here as always. My name is Dan Worry. I wear a number of different hats professionally. I'm an author, an educator, a speaker, but among my very proudest titles is that I serve as a strategic advisor to the foundation, which exists to extend the truly remarkable legacy of the late film and music mogul Saul Zaentz. Today, we're going to talk a little bit about supply and demand, and specifically supply of teachers. You've probably heard of childcare deserts. Those of you who work in the early childhood space, these are communities in which insufficient supply basically exists to meet the needs of families. But the same is also very much true within our K-12 system. We have educational deserts all across the country, and in many cases, a root cause, if not the root cause of these deserts, is an insufficient number of qualified teachers who are either able to live in these communities or maybe willing to live in certain communities. We frequently think of these deserts as being kind of poor and rural, and that may well be the case. Communities that sometimes lack the kinds of social and other opportunities and infrastructure that may be appealing to young adults who want to settle down in a community. But it is also important to note that many of the nation's most challenged education deserts are actually in relatively affluent urban and suburban areas where, because of the cost of living, teachers simply can't afford to reside, which is where affordable housing plays such an important role. So today we're going to be talking about affordable housing and some remarkable innovators in this space who are connecting affordable housing with education. We are joined today by Ron Bate, who is the founding partner and CEO of RBH Group in Newark, New Jersey. Also by Dennis Chrétien, who is the school leader of the Discovery Charter School in Newark. Ron and Dennis have a connection, which we'll explain here in just a few minutes. Also joined today by Paul Major, who is the president and CEO of Rural Homes at the Paradox Community Trust in Colorado, by Kathleen Merritt, who is executive director of Bright Futures for Early Childhood and Families, and by Laura Cohen, who is the vice president of care and education at Mission Driven Finance. As we get rolling, just a couple of quick housekeeping notes. Later in the hour, we will turn to you. We'll pose questions that maybe you have for the panel. If you have a question during the hour, if you would, please use the Q&A function on your Zoom toolbar at the bottom of your screen, as opposed to the chat. The chat can move very quickly throughout the course of the hour, and we wouldn't want to lose your question. So if it's a question specifically that you'd like us to pose to the panel, please use that Q&A function. Also, later throughout the hour, we'll be dropping in the registration links for the October and November editions of the Meeting the Moment webinar. On October 28th, we are thrilled to welcome Dr. Howard Gardner of Project Zero at Harvard. If you have worked in the education field, Dr. Gardner probably needs no introduction. He is best known for a work called Frames of Mind, in which he laid out a theory of multiple intelligences. And so if you have been in a teacher prep course at any point in the past couple of decades, it's likely that you have been exposed to Dr. Gardner's work. He is preparing to re-release Frames of Mind and an updated edition. And so we're going to be spending the whole hour with him on October 28th. Then on November 20th, we're going to be looking at the importance of early relationships. We'll be joined by Isabel Howe, who is the author of the new book, Love to Learn, by Dr. Junlei Lee of the Zaentz Early Education Initiative at Harvard. And we'll get an international perspective in November from my dear friend Suzanne Zedek, who is working on leading early relational health all across Scotland. So it should be a fascinating conversation there in November as well. So with that, let's kick into gear and jump into today's conversation. Ron, maybe we begin with you. And first off, thank you for to you and to all our panelists for taking the time to be here. Fascinated to hear more about Teachers Village, which began in Newark, New Jersey, roughly a decade or so ago. Walk us through the story here. What is Teachers Village and how did it come to be?
Hey, thank you. Thanks, Dan. Excited to be here. Newark Teachers Village was a is in the heart of downtown Newark. They were the first ground up multifamily buildings in downtown Newark in 40 or 50 years. And so, and because of that, we needed significant public investments to make the project work. And so we wanted to create something lasting for the community. And so we really honed in on, really looked right across the river at New York City and really honed in on middle income housing. How if we were going to build, if we were going to start sort of building in this community, that Newark had done very well in building affordable housing. You started talking about affordable housing. In Newark, we did have quite a bit of affordable housing, and there had been great programs in the low income housing tax credit world for 30 or 40 years building affordable housing, but it wasn't exactly where we needed it, and quite frankly, the teachers in Newark made too much money to qualify for affordable housing. And so, we had affordable housing. Newark was surrounded by affluent suburbs, and there was plenty of market rate housing in the region. And so, I mean, there's never enough housing, but there was, certainly the capital markets were financing a bunch of market rate housing. And so we really honed in on middle income housing to start off this master plan development in the heart of downtown. And and once we sort of became fixated on that, teachers were an easy target. They made up a significant portion of the workforce in Newark. So even then, even though only 15% of the teachers were living in Newark at the time, but we had about 5,000 teachers in Newark. Relative to about 1,000 employees in government. We had about 1,000 police, and we had about 200 fire. So the teachers made up the lion's share of the workforce. And at the time, Dennis is here. There was this burgeoning educational community and conversation in Newark. We'd been talking for a long time about K through 12 education, early childhood learning, and there was a significant conversation underway with then Mayor Cory Booker, as to sort of what, where were Newark Public Schools going, and the introduction of charter schools into the offerings for K through 12 children in Newark. And so, honing in on middle income housing and sort of we're based in Newark, New Jersey. So understanding the conversation that was going on in education, it made sense to start with a community that would be centered around educators as a tool to recruit and retain the best educators in the region to come to Newark and teach. And then centered around education, which is to say, we were very fixated on, okay, once we have these teachers, once we have charter school teachers, once we have district school teachers, once we have the independent school teachers of Newark, once we have senior teachers with junior teachers, how do we create an environment that makes better teachers? So fostering interactions between the teachers, but also creating all kinds of opportunities to bring into the community for teachers to further their educations and sort of and really instigate their interests, even if it was just a function of having teachers come for 2 years, teach in Newark, and then go get credits towards an MBA, for example. So there was a whole sort of discussion around once we had these teachers, once we created this quality luxury housing for teachers and created this community with all the amenities that you would see in a luxury multifamily housing development, but also sort of again centered around education and creating better teachers. And so that's how it came to be. We then worked with a coalition of forces in New Jersey to create this slate of public investments to be able to build this project. Ultimately it was 6 buildings with 203 units of residential housing for teachers. There was about 65,000 square feet of retail, but there was also uniquely in Newark Teachers Village, we had 4 new schools for 1,000 kids, K through 12. Sorry, K through eighth grade. Actually, early childhood learning through eighth grade in Teachers Village, Newark specifically, and that's where Dennis comes. Dennis's charter school, the Discovery Charter School, was one of the anchor tenants in this community. And besides it being unique in terms of recruiting educators and centered around education, the way we financed this project really became a model for other projects in the downtown, and really became a model for us as we brought Teachers Villages to other jurisdictions.
Well, I want to ask you, you mentioned prior to Teachers Village, only 15% of the teachers, was that 15% of the teachers in Newark that actually were living in, and was that because of cost of living? What do you attribute that
So
previous figure?
So interesting. It's usually attached to cost of living. Here it was there was just lack of supply, right? There was just and so it wasn't a function of the cost. It was a function that there wasn't suitable housing for teachers that are traveling all over the region. So it's interesting. It's the same issue whether you're in distressed neighborhoods or neighborhoods that require economic development, or you're in very expensive neighborhoods. Same issue. Just the lack of quality housing that teachers want to live in. So in Newark is a little bit different than sort of when we do a project in the Bronx, for example, which we're working on now, where there's plenty of housing, but the cost is very expensive.
And am I right? The current occupancy is, did you say 70% teachers?
Yes. So the goal was always to create, again, a middle income housing product. The goal was to have at least 70% educators living in the community. And we've exceeded that 70% since inception. And then it was always designed to have 30% other professionals. But yes, over 70% educators from, again, independent schools, the district schools, and the charter schools of Newark. At junior to senior teachers. So the school that Dennis worked at, one of the founding leaders of the school before she retired, she lived in the community. But we have a real broad segment of the educational community living in Teachers Village.
And I wanted to ask you too about the sort of public investment involved here, for the benefit of those of us and those in the audience who maybe aren't really well steeped in the real estate development world. Can you talk a little bit about how these affordable housing projects come into existence? I can see, for example, just sort of putting myself in the shoes of a developer. Why, maybe affordable housing would be appealing to elected leaders in a community, but that might be a challenge for, for me or for you or, for whoever is in that developer role, not because they maybe wouldn't desire it, but because it's costly and not something obviously that you can create at a loss. How does this come into being? Do you have this concept and you bring it to a city, or is the city looking to create housing and you come in as a vendor? How does that work?
Yeah, I mean, so in this particular instance, we did bring it to the city. There, we knew in downtown Newark, since there had not been development in a long time, you needed public investments. So in this particular case, we designed a project that we brought to then the administration, and then really created all kinds of tools to be able to finance this kinds of projects. But yeah, they require public investments, similar to affordable housing, where you need to get low-income housing tax credits, you need to apply to government. So it is more difficult, right? And there is a cottage industry of affordable housing developers in the country. Generally, if you're doing this as more than one-offs, they're really organizations of scale, because you need to be working in multiple jurisdictions and multiple times. You need to have balance sheet to be able to carry these projects for the duration that they take to execute them. It is harder to execute than market rate development, so it's not for everyone. And then, when you think about workforce housing and middle income, it's even harder because the LIHTC program might support a little bit of the project, but there's a host of other public investments that you have to bring to the table in order to be able to effectuate this stuff. So it's certainly not for the faint of heart. I sometimes ask myself, how the heck did I get into this? But we were sitting in Newark, New Jersey, and really it was the right solution. And we became fixated on the mission. So it does take a unique developer to sort of, fight these good fights to get this done. In recent years, after really slugging it away in jurisdictions as we go, everywhere we've gone, we're reinventing the capital stack because there were different tools in each jurisdiction. And today we execute with a 501c3 in partnership with a 501c3 that can issue tax-exempt bonds. So we've streamlined the execution. We've created an execution at scale. We've created an execution that is national. But it's both ultimately, right? You need the right developer, and you need government pushing in the same direction. And with respect to the Newark Teachers Village, there was literally city and state government coming together and creating programs to be able to effectuate this kind of development. So it's really both. And today, however, and more, you're seeing jurisdictions that are requiring affordable housing, right, as part of approvals to get market rate housing. And therein lies a great opportunity to be able to shape more workforce housing, not just affordable, create a range of unit mixes. And there, I think you're starting to see actually in a lot of jurisdictions, market rate developers trying to figure this out because they have to. And I think that's a really good intersection and a good dynamic that didn't really occur even just 5 years ago.
And I'm curious, does the village aspect, the presence of retail and other non-residential space help to support that affordable housing part of the equation?
It does, right? Ultimately, right, if you want to be a recruitment and retention tool for teachers, you got to make it a place that they want to live. And teachers, especially if you're recruiting, retaining a lot of younger teachers coming from all over the country, right? You need to have the quality of life and the amenities that they'd otherwise want. You want to be near mass transit so they can travel throughout the region. And so, yes, having everything you would have in a luxury multifamily building and then some is really what you need to make it all work.
And maybe last question as a transition to Dennis. Ron, I can't help but notice that charter schools seem to have really gravitated, particularly toward that project in Newark. I don't know if that's been the case at the other. Maybe you want to mention the other cities where Teacher Villages is happening as well. But what do you attribute? Is there something particularly appealing in the charter school world to this sort of project?
Well, I think, in Newark specifically, when we were building Teachers Village, you had a lot of very good schools that were starting to emerge in the marketplace. And they were utilizing really dilapidated old buildings that was either provided by the school district or otherwise available to them as they were sort of figuring out funding mechanisms and so forth that we take for granted today. And so at the time, there was a real need for physical spaces for the charter schools. So that's how this sort of, building the schools themselves became part of Teachers Village. As we move forward, that need changes everywhere we go, every jurisdiction you go to. So a Teachers Village today really, in most jurisdictions, is just going to be a vertically integrated building with the same, recruitment and retention tool and the same aspect where we're focused on education and education is sent to the community, but it'll be inside amenity spaces and will be done through continuing education partnerships with local organizations, as opposed to actually having an early childhood learning center or K through 12. Early childhood learning center is a little bit different. We can incorporate them in the retail spaces and buildings, but sort of sort of the facilities you need for K through A or K through 12th grade schools, you really it's really jurisdiction to jurisdiction and not exactly what we're doing as we go forward. So it was a particular need in Newark at the time. We did it. We knew how to finance it, and so we assisted and again created new schools for 1,000 kids, early childhood learning through 8th grade, and we built another school near Teachers Village. But outside in Newark, it's really a vertically integrated building and generally has an education space that is open to partnerships with local educational partners or other nonprofits that have some sort of continuing education component, and have some sort of offering for the larger community that we're building in, but also for our micro community.
Well, Dennis, let's maybe transition to you for a moment. Ron mentioned that your school, Discovery Charter School, was one of the four is one of four charter schools that exists on site. There was one of the anchor tenants as Teacher Villages got started. Talk a little bit about the school itself, but also sort of how the connection to the Teacher Villages concept has benefited your faculty and maybe your families.
So I started teaching at this school, Discovery, in 2003, downtown Newark. And then 10 years into it, the two school founder were starting to look for another space because the building we were in, I was laughing before, was dilapidated. I remember the AC plate that had the water falling on us during a class. And the school downtown was surrounded mostly by empty lots, some of them used as parking lot, but some of them not used at all. So it was really a feeling of an empty place in downtown. Mm-hmm. And then I was not in the conversation at the time because it was with the founder of the school, but I believe Ron just came by and visited the school and offered us to be part of this project. And what was great is that Ron and his team offered to co-design the space. Our school is a little different from a mainstream school. We're very small, 100 kids only from 4th to 8th, and a bit of an open space concept. And so the place where we were at was not easily, conforming to the wishes of the founders. And so the fact that we could design this half open space with our own team was unbelievable. I don't think we would have had this opportunity anywhere else. And one of the vision of the founder was that please do not make this school look like a hospital or a jail. I don't want any straight walls. And you don't have any straight walls. So I came, in the space at Teacher Village in 2013. And so what it looks like today is a community that's very comfortable and attractive to live in a place that didn't look like that, 10 years, more 20 years ago now. And a level of collaboration between the schools, and also between school and local business. So for example, at the end of October, we have a fall festival in the street behind the school, and we collaborate on this with Link Charter School, who is in the same building as us. And we know each other with the businesses that are on the street level. There is a corner store that's very famous for the kids. But, if the kids get rowdy, the owner of the store just comes upstairs and we talk and we figure out what's best to do. And same thing with the bank that at the corner that we can work with. There is a gym across the street where we collaborated on some classes in the past. And Ron has also lended some of the space to some cultural organization on the street level. And we've collaborated also with this group of artists. Last spring, we had the performance of Peter and the Wolf in one of the street level space, and we brought 25 kids. So there are also events that are organized by Teacher Village for the residents, but that our teacher, whether they live in the community or not, participate in. So it created a totally new space that 20 years ago was unimaginable. And some teachers do enjoy living in the space. I also have parents of some of my kids who live across the streets. So it's a very different atmosphere that went from isolation to being a full community.
That's very cool. Ron, did Dennis mentioned that you were able to go to them and actually design the space with it. Were you able to do that with each of those four charter schools? Because I can see where that would be a huge appeal.
Yeah, we did. We really did a design build for each of the schools. We also provided a turnkey operation for them in terms of financing it and building it. So they wound up just sort of leasing space that they otherwise would have leased. And we gave them long-term leases, and we financed the projects and so forth. But I will say, you asked me at the top of the call, top of the webinar or whatever, that what was sort of inspiration in Teachers Village. I'll say, before getting into the technical stuff about middle income housing and looking capital markets and so forth, and trying to fit sort of a need, it was literally walking into a school like Dennis's, where in Newark at that time, you walked in and you saw the energy in the four walls there, and what they were doing in Discovery. It was literally the fourth graders and the eighth graders were in one room, and Dennis. The first time I walked in, Dennis was teaching robotics. But Barbara Weiland, the founder, would be standing on elevated, reading the New York Times to the fourth and eighth graders, and they would each have their own assignments on how to do it. And it's one of the highest performing schools in the state of New Jersey. And so, classroom to classroom all over Newark, this was happening. There was this energy of people like Dennis, who were like coming to Newark 6 days a week often, teaching their hearts out to these kids, and really making meaningful change here. And it was literally people like Dennis that I'm like, okay, I want to capture an economic development and housing project with all Dennis's and all the teachers and all these people that are coming to Newark that really want to move the dime on education and really care about the kids of Newark. And so, I remember, as Dennis started speaking, I started remembering, like, walking into his building, that it was the former United Health United Way or whatever. There was another 501c3, but I remember the space so vividly, and sitting with Barbara and Irene and negotiating a lease. But while they're teaching, and so yeah. So anyway, anecdotally.
Love it. And I love thank you for sharing the pictures as well. I think it helps to really bring to life, what a beautiful space Teachers Village is. Want to remind you all that at the end of the hour, we're gonna take some of your questions, continue putting those in the Q&A function. But now we're gonna jump from urban New Jersey to rural Colorado, and our other three panelists are all involved in collaboration in some very important work out there. And so I want to start, Paul, maybe and let you set the stage for us. I know that you have been at work in recent years, not only expanding housing options in rural Colorado, but also really thinking carefully about how to make sure that childcare, and that in particular that family childcare, is an important part of this equation. Tell us a little bit about what's happening at Rural Homes, and how you're connecting families and providers here.
Well, thank you, Dan, and thank you, Sal Zantz Foundation, for this opportunity. And I think, just relevant to meeting the moment, we clearly, as Ron talked about, we have a affordable housing and a childcare crisis. And the costs are too high for parents, for providers, for all of that. We don't pay enough to our providers, and subsidies are going away. And so we need to think about scalable solutions. I think it's really important to understand that the space that Ron works in is the tax credit space. So he referred to it as LIHTC or low income housing tax credits. We work in the lane of no tax credits. We do get some grant subsidies from the state, but it's a different market. And what we're trying to do is come up with a solution that can be scalable for non-urban environments, because tax credit programs only work at scale. And what we need in a lot of places across, certainly across rural Colorado, is 20 homes at a time or 50 homes at a time, not not hundreds of units. So we're trying to perfect a model where it basically can be scaled because the capital can be stretched and repeated, and we can essentially solve two problems at the same time: provide an affordable house, but also provide childcare slots by making sure some of those homes are pre-licensed for home-based childcare, what you called family childcare. So it comes in many different forms. Actually, 7 million kids in America get home-based care in one form or the other, completely unstructured to highly licensed, controlled, and regulated by the state. So we're on that extreme where our homes are pre-licensed by the state and our providers are licensed by the state. But I'll leave that to Kathleen because she's the expert. But really the idea here is to link housing and home-based childcare operations or opportunities to get to developers to say, if you're going to build 20 homes or 30 homes or whatever it is, make sure some of those homes are pre-licensed and available for a provider to come in and start a cottage business, a home-based childcare business. So in the case of our pilot project in Ouray, it's a childcare desert. It's obviously has no affordable housing. No one's going to come in there and do this. No one's going to solve this because there's money involved. There is no profit margin in this. What we're trying to do is show that we can get to a scalable model that can return enough so it can be repeated over and over again. So let me share just a couple of slides, and then I'm going to turn it over to Laura because she can talk about essentially the financing of this and why we're excited about this. So again, I run a affordable housing, nonprofit affordable housing development company. We build affordable homes for sale. And just like Ron, we're pricing them. Sort of our benchmark is to price them to local teachers. I think in our three projects, 50% of the buyers were educators. So it's that benchmark of a good job in a community, and that's essential for that community to thrive, like a teacher, deputy sheriff, town manager, emergency responder. They all have good career jobs. There is zero product in the housing space for them to buy. There's maybe something old and dilapidated on wheels, or there's something 3 times more, 5 times more than they can afford. And this is exacerbated because of the interest rates. But literally, the average teacher salary in Colorado at the current market rates, they can only afford a $180,000 home, a brand new home. Nobody is building a $180,000 brand new home in Colorado unless it's not going to last long. So our objective is to build a high quality generational home that that is priced for that teacher. So this is just an example of one of our neighborhoods. This is we wanted to show this because these 3 kids all live in this neighborhood. We do modular construction. And so the house is built in a factory. It's a stick-built house, just like a 2x4 house that has been built since ad nauseum, but it's built in a factory to improve efficiency. We can build 30% faster and 30% cheaper. But these 3 kids were watching those houses getting set that day. They actually all live in that neighborhood. This is one of the neighborhoods. It's important to point out on the far left is one of the childcare-based pre-licensed homes. And then here's the last slide of actually one of the similar homes on the other end of that subdivision, and then the 2 of the providers that are running these programs. So just wanted to give you a little context I'm going to turn it over to
But before
Laura.
we jump to Laura, Paul, when you say that they are pre-licensed, I assume what that means is that they meet all of the state licensing requirements for a home-based childcare program. Does the,
Exactly.
the
Kathleen's an expert on this, but essentially, when you think about pre-licensing a house, you're two with the state of Colorado, it's two things. It's one, the space. So you need a certain amount of square footage for each kid, both indoor and outdoor play space. And obviously the space needs to be safe. There need to be really functionalities issues like the provider can have full visibility of the kids when they're in the kitchen preparing a meal. Just really basic functionality. And then there's the licensing of the provider. And so there's really a very rigorous process. And normally licensing of the space can take a year, but we were able to get pre-licensing because our state leaned into this and said, this is great. Let's support home builders that could provide, frankly, more houses available for home-based childcare operations.
That's fantastic. All right, Laura, let's jump into you and the work of mission driven finance, which I love. Your the website you'll see front and center if you ever visit the website. I don't know if it's sort of formally your mission statement, but I think it sums up nicely this statement around getting capital to flow where it doesn't but should. So tell us a little bit more about mission driven finance, and specifically then what role you play and how you got connected to this project in rural Colorado.
Thanks, Dan, and thanks to everyone who showed up today. This intersection between housing and education is one that I think deserves more thought and attention. And I'm excited about the project we're sharing in rural Colorado, as well as Teachers Village, both amazing examples. So Mission Driven Finance is a social impact asset management firm. That means that we help investors who want to both earn a profit, but also make a difference in their community, connect with opportunities to invest to improve health, wealth, and education, and always with an equity and uh, and social purpose heart to what we do. Some of the funds that we operate are funds that entities across the country have conceived but need someone to run the back office operations of. But we also have started up several of our own funds, including Care Access Real Estate. The acronym is CARE. And CARE is a social impact real estate fund for childcare facilities. To our knowledge, we're the only real estate fund in the nation that really specializes in childcare facilities. We launched just a little over 2 years ago, and today own 20 properties for childcare. So far, all of them houses for family childcare, but our expectation and plan is to start purchasing commercial buildings for childcare centers imminently. So ultimately, the fund will own both childcare centers and childcare houses. We connected with Rural Homes and Bright Futures as they had come up with this brilliant idea of including childcare houses in the affordable house project that Rural Homes was developing, but ran into a dilemma, which was that even with all of the favorable mortgage financing and down payment assistance that Rural Homes had pulled together to help families move into their houses, the childcare providers who were candidates to live in the two houses designed for childcare could not qualify for the mortgage financing and would not be able to buy the houses from the developer. Care Access Real Estate is designed as a long-term holder of childcare real estate. So you've just heard from two developers, and we sit in a different spot in the real estate spectrum. We are committed to holding the properties, leasing them to childcare providers as a childcare friendly and socially just landlord, and helping them to have a pathway to asset ownership themselves, which is always a powerful thing for families to be able to do to develop wealth, and also for nonprofits or childcare businesses to strengthen their own businesses. So that's what we do. And in the case of this project in Ouray. We purchased the 2 childcare houses and are leasing them to Melissa and Estrella, while Kathleen and Bright Futures does the really important work of supporting them to establish their businesses, grow their businesses, and make sure that they're providing quality childcare in them.
And Laura, do you serve only as a landlord in this case, or do you become sort of part of the business itself?
We do not become part of the business. We really our notion is that we want to keep our relationship with our tenants quite conventional, if you will, in the sense of being their landlord and not being involved in their business. On the other hand, it's not conventional because our lease is a standard lease, but it has a childcare addendum. And so it's an addendum that says we're committed to delivering a licensable property to you and maintaining it in licensable condition. And you're committing to us as our tenant to continue to provide childcare in this space that we're leasing to you, licensed childcare, among other provisions. So we've got a childcare addendum attached to a regular lease, and we are not directly involved with the childcare businesses.
And have you mentioned that you own, is it 20 properties? Is that what you said?
That's right.
Is on what basis have you chosen those 20? Are there particular geographic areas or other factors that you're looking at in terms of where you're making these investments?
Yes. So 18 of our 22 houses are located in Clark County, Nevada. And that's because as we were getting started, the state of Nevada was facing an emergency. It desperately needed to grow the availability of family childcare. There's a real absence of family childcare in the city that never sleeps, a location where family childcare is exactly suited for supporting families who have off hours or off shift work obligations. And the barrier, the thing that was preventing providers from establishing childcare businesses was their inability to get into houses. And the homeowners associations were in the way, and other things. So the state of Nevada gave us a grant, and that has fueled our operations in Nevada. In general, we're looking for places where we've got strong partners on the ground, where we see that there's some political tailwinds and commitment by both local and state governments to expanding the supply of childcare, and where we have funding partners, can be public, and as it was in the case of Las Vegas, or can be private. In the case of Ouray, clearly we had these amazing partners that are here on this call. And additionally, Paul had and Rural Homes had done work to aggregate capital that was flowing into the project and made the economics of the purchases and ongoing operations of the homes work for our fund. And at the same time, we are, in many cases, bringing in philanthropic funds or other grant funds to make the rent in our properties affordable for our childcare tenants. And in particular, we're committed to providing a rent ramp where when they move in and are starting to build and grow their business, there's discounted rent while they build their enrollment and build their long-term business sustainability to be able to afford a long-term market rate rent.
Similar criteria as you're looking at center-based properties?
Yes. Well, yes, except that in the case of the residential properties, we absolutely are reliant on our local partners to help us recruit, screen, select, and support the providers who are moving into our houses. There's less of an imperative for our child care center properties to be clustered and aggregated. We think we can support centers that are more scattered than on the residential side.
That's great. Kathleen, let's turn to you. I know your organization, Bright Futures, plays such an important role here. Probably less on the real estate side than the rest of the panel, and more on the early childhood side. Tell us a little bit about what Bright Futures is doing as part of this fantastic project.
Yes, you're right, Dan. We are the boots on the ground with this project. And, Bright Futures, we are really the organization that is supporting children and families by strengthening the systems they engage in. And here in rural Colorado, we hear over and over again that access to childcare and safe and stable, affordable housing are two of the biggest barriers that families face. And then when you add on top of that, since 2020, we've seen this massive shift in the early childhood sector. So over the past 5 years, as most people on this call are probably aware, there really has been a mass exodus of qualified, dedicated early childhood educators. And, you know, that is due to significant wage disparities in the industry. And really, as a result of that trend that continues, we've really been working to scale up this home-based childcare model alongside affordable housing. And what we're seeing with this new approach is that the family childcare home-based model really better fits the needs of our smaller communities. And to make this happen, we've really been leaning into some intentional partnerships, working with our communities and local public officials to embed childcare options into their affordable housing developments, as well as embedding family childcare into community master planning. So for the Rural Homes Early Childhood Initiative specifically, we work closely with Rural Homes and Mission Driven Finance and the Ouray community to really provide this home-based childcare model because, like I said earlier, in small towns like Ouray, this is a better fit. We simply don't have the population density to staff or sustain like the center-based model that you see more successful in like an urban area. So as we are out in the field supporting children and families, we hear over and over how hard it is to live and raise a family in rural Colorado. And we really are making strides in the Ouray community to ease this burden by addressing both affordable housing and access to childcare together. And with the model in Ouray specifically with Melissa and Estrella, and then as we're scaling up family childcare across our region, we really are developing local family childcare entrepreneurs and business owners. So we work alongside them through the licensing process. We assist them in honing in on small business skills, as well as kind of ongoing helping them network with families in their community. And the two women in Ouray, they really are strengthening the local economy by providing this crucial resource to children and families by giving parents the opportunity to go to work while their children are in safe, nurturing, early learning environments.
And Kathleen, I want to ask you about Melissa and Estrella. We had talked about the possibility of you know, one or both of them joining in this conversation to lend a little bit of kind of boots on the ground perspective in the same way that Dennis fortunately has been able to. But we know that, you know, family childcare is a very labor intensive and small scale sort of proposition, in that frequently family childcare providers have no other staff, right? And so, you know, asking them to join us for a conversation like this in the middle of the day would be very challenging for them. But what, you know, is there anything maybe from their perspective, based on your knowledge, that you would share about sort of the benefit of having had access to these pre-licensed homes, having access to a kindly landlord like Laura?
Well, yes, they have the benefit of having this like tremendous amount of resources kind of wrapping around them to not only support kind of the pre-licensing and the move-in process, but Bright Futures and Mission Driven Finance being there along the way as they're developing their business model and they are, you know, ramping up their enrollment. So I would say the benefit is through the collaboration that they have with Bright Futures and Mission Driven Finance, as well as community partners as well.
Great. Well, we've got about 10 minutes left before the top of the hour, and I want to jump in. We've got some great questions in the chat that I'd like to pull up here over the last couple of minutes, and Ron's been doing a great job of answering in writing as well for some of these. Ron, just as a heads up, I might ask you some of these as well, just so that for the benefit of those who maybe weren't reading the chat, or for those who will be watching the replay here. But there's a question here from Kim that I think, Laura, maybe is for you. She's asking, can you speak a little bit to how the family child care providers have a pathway to ownership? What does that look like?
The typical care lease for residential properties includes an opportunity to purchase the house from us. That's not a normal lease provision, and that's part of our child care addendum. And in most cases, we include in that opportunity to purchase a split of any appreciation profit that accrues on the house. So if the fair market value of the house when the provider elects to purchase it is above our cash basis, both what we've purchased and then if we've had to invest any money into renovating the house, if that delta is positive, we'll split that profit with the purchaser, the child care purchaser of our house 50-50 as a credit at closing to help smooth and ease the pathway to home ownership. That's also an atypical landlord behavior. Most landlords hoard any appreciation profits. So renters pay their rent over time and gain nothing from it. The landlord takes all of the appreciation profit. In the case of the URA houses, they are part of an affordable housing development where the appreciation is capped at 3% to assure long-term affordability. So we don't have that appreciation share in that lease, but we do have the opportunity to purchase. And someone else asked, has that been realized yet? We have to hold the real estate for at least 2 years as in our structure as a real estate investment trust, and we're just next month hitting our first 2-year anniversary for our first leases, and the initial childcare providers who are crossing that 2-year line won't be able to exercise that option because the houses have not yet appreciated above our cash basis. But I'm pretty confident in that in like sort of next year when their leases come around again, that appreciation will have gotten them above that level. And I do know from our independent evaluation surveying the providers that all of them plan to purchase the house from us. It is their intention, their expectation, and their dream to buy the house from us, which both speaks to their intention and expectation of long-term stability in the house. It says that they like the house and want to own it. And it also says that part of their motivation set for being part of the program and living in the house is that they want to become asset owners and that they're working towards that goal.
Let me throw one other question, Laura, that is probably a Colorado question. Kimberly is noting that in San Francisco, there's an organization that is piloting down payment assistance for home-based providers who are first-time buyers. And so she is asking, can you talk about the supports that are provided to these child care providers and the programs? What types of services are needed and helpful for them?
I'll let Kathleen take most of that, but in terms of home ownership, one thing that I think is pretty sort of like scenario shifting about the care approach is that home-based childcare providers often are in small licenses up to 6 kids where the net profit is pretty small and the opportunity for earning enough income off of that business to save for a down payment and qualify for a mortgage is really a large stretch and difficult. In the instance of care, we're putting them in a house that's sized for large family childcare operations where you can earn a thriving wage and giving them time to build that business, stabilize that business, and then save for down payment and qualify for that mortgage. So it flips the script around where you're in the space where you can earn the great wage first and then position you for becoming homeowners through that stability and that larger business. But Kathleen can speak to the really important supports that her organization is providing to the providers on both the business side and the quality side.
Thank you, Laura. I don't know about, I mean, I know philanthropy has stepped in with some down payment assistance, so I do think I should pass it over to Paul with this, yeah,
So
specifically
just
about down payment assistance.
specifically to down payment assistance and mortgages. I mean, so when you think about affordability in a house, it's both, can you build a house that less expensively, lower the cost of construction, but can you assist the buyer in financing? And that's where down payment assistance, or what we call mortgage rate buy downs, are critical. So right now we're in a high mortgage rate environment where a 30-year fixed mortgage is 6.5%. We even had a 2.5% fixed 30-year mortgage for our project, and we still couldn't get the home providers into these houses. And primarily it's because, as Laura said, they don't have all of these savings. They're working in an environment where they can't save. And so both that, and it's a startup business. So you don't do a mortgage, you do a mortgage on your trailing income, not on your forward income. So to the question, down payment assistance, rate buy downs, all of that is absolutely the bridge to get people that are creating small businesses and startups that could be successful or will be successful into home ownership.
All right, we've got just a couple of minutes. Ron, I wanted to pull one of the questions back up from the chat that you were looking at in writing, and Corinne is asking this question that I think maybe speaks really to the village part of your work. She's asking, when we think about care, we think of it at both ends of the spectrum, right? That we need care for young children, but we also need care for the aging. And so she was asking, has there been any thought to incorporating housing for senior citizens, for example?
Yeah, so the teachers' villages that we're delivering now all have an independent living senior component to it, as part of an intergenerational community. We were inspired by intergenerational communities, mostly in Europe today, mostly in Holland, and a bunch around Barcelona. There were a lot of studies surrounding, there they have housing issues for students at the universities in these urban areas. So there's been, about over a decade now, decade and a half now, of sort of body of research of these students living with seniors, which is where they were placing them to live in these university towns. And the benefit of the students having that responsibility with a senior, but also the benefits of the seniors living with these students and this sort of second act in life. And so we became sort of inspired by that to sort of bring retired teachers back to the center of the community, and seeing what we saw in over COVID, where we started losing, we were losing teachers in droves, bringing retired teachers back to the center of the community, back to back to our communities to be able to help the teachers that are in the schools today. And so everything we're doing now has an independent living senior component. That is, there's no memory care and assisted living, and sort of that's left to sort of those that specialize in that work. But an independent living senior housing program that has all kinds of amenities and offerings as it relates to wellness and wellness and health, but also which is inherently more affordable, right? Keeping the senior as long as possible in the independent living facility, as opposed to being in a facility that's paying for all this assisted living and memory care. So that's inherently more affordable in and of itself, but also bringing these retired teachers to interact with the younger teachers and so forth. So Teachers Village Plus is what we call it. Really is an intergenerational community marketed to K through 12 teachers and retired teachers, with, again, component for other professionals in the workforce portion of it, and a portion of units for other independent living seniors, but who also can contribute greatly to the education of our current teachers. And so that's a big component of what we're doing in every one of our projects now. And generally, it's about 50% of the units are what we call workforce housing units for the teachers, K through 12 teachers, and the other what we call senior units for the independent living senior component.
That's fantastic. We're just about out of time. Ron, for those who might be interested in exploring teachers' villages in their community, I know, we've talked a lot about Newark today, but this is a concept that is sort of spreading across the country. What other cities are you in?
So we are heavily in the New York City metropolitan area with projects in the Bronx, in Mott Haven, in Jamaica, Queens, in White Plains, New York, in Jersey City, and Newark. We're working in Atlanta is one of the next ones that are breaking ground in the next few weeks. We're working in Chicago. We're working in Stockton, California. I think that's about it for now.
All right. Well, I can't thank you all enough. And Dennis, I want to maybe a special word of thanks to you. I know we pulled you out of schoolwork today on relatively short notice, and so grateful that you could jump in and join us. And I hope, Kathleen, that you will extend our thanks to our family child care homes in Colorado as well, and let them know that we're speaking of their amazing programs today as well. I want to thank our panel. Ron Bate is the founding partner and CEO of RBH Group. Dennis Cretinon is the school leader at Discovery Charter School, both in Newark, New Jersey. Paul Major, president and CEO of Rural Homes at the Paradox Community Trust of Colorado. Kathleen Merritt, also in Colorado, executive director of Bright Futures for Early Childhood and Families. And Laura Cohn is vice president of care and education at Mission Driven Finance. Thanks everybody for joining the panel today. More importantly, maybe thanks to all of you for taking time out of your busy schedules today to tune in. So glad to have you as always. Hope that you will be back with us on October 28th as we talk to the great Howard Gardner. So we'll see you in a month. Have a good afternoon, everyone.